The subject for today is Karma Yoga and the monkey mind. We should first be very clear what the monkey mind is. And the monkey mind is typically spoken of in Indian culture, specifically from, let's say, Buddhism. And it clearly speaks about a mind which is unsettled, restless, capricious, whimsical, fanciful, inconstant, confused, indecisive, and totally uncontrollable. In the Bhagavad Puran, there is the example given of Hiranyakashipu, who is carrying on his lap his son, and carrying his son on his lap, he is boasting to his son about all the enemies he has killed. This enemy I killed the day before yesterday, this enemy I killed yesterday, this enemy I have killed today, this enemy I shall kill tomorrow, this enemy I shall destroy the day after. So his son, Prahlad Maharaj, looks at his father and says, "My dear father, why don't you understand that indeed you have no enemies? Why don't you understand that you have no enemies? Your only enemy is your own uncontrolled mind. So your mind is in truth your only enemy. And the monkey mind is that mind which is completely out of control. It's constantly seeking enjoyment, it's constantly seeking control, it's constantly seeking to be better than another person. It's constantly moving from the past to the present to the future, largely moving from the past and future. It's always concerned with the idea of I, me, and myself. This is the nature of the mind. And there is a very nice story from the adventures of Sinbad the sailor. And when Sinbad the sailor is marooned on an island, he tries to explore the island. And while exploring the island, he finds that on the tree of one of the trees on that island, there is a small hunchback dwarf, misshapen. And that dwarf begs him, he says, "I cannot walk. Can you please carry me on your shoulders just to the edge of the beach?" And Sinbad agrees. And when that old man of the sea, that's who he is, sits on the shoulders of Sinbad the sailor, he grabs hold of his ears, he pulls his hair, he bites him in the neck and forces him to do whatever he wants and refuses to get off. This old man of the sea analogy, the companion who never leaves us, who constantly harasses us, who constantly forces us to do things that we know are against our better interests. This analogy is that of your mind, your uncontrolled mind. Arjun in the Bhagawad Geeta in the 6th chapter tells Krishna why he cannot meditate. And he tells Krishna, Chanchalahi mana Krishna pramati balavad dridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayurivasu duskaram. My mind is restless, turbulent, obstinate. To try to control the mind is like trying to control the wind. Very difficult to control the mind. And because the mind is so difficult to control, it is a cause of all sorrow. Some foolish people, perhaps lacking in intelligence themselves, try to point out that this chatter of your mind is wonderful. It's a sign of intelligence. Not so. This part of your brain that keeps chattering all the time is being demonstrated through multiple studies to be the cause of your depression, your anxiety. It is known to be the cause of your mental distress. And thus, the more your mind chatters, the more miserable you are. And the less your mind chatters, the more peaceful you are. This is now an established scientific fact. So the question is, how do we reduce it? And how do we minimize its impact on our lives? And to understand this, first we have to go into the advances of neuroscience and neuroimaging that have taken place in the last decade. And we have discovered many things about the brain in the last decade. And now, thanks to neuroimaging, we realize that it is not a single part of the brain that does something, but it is multiple parts of the brain that activate simultaneously in a circuit. And these circuits make up the state of our mind and the state of our brain. So it's not one part of the brain, it's multiple parts of the brain that light up together, that are simultaneously activated. And these bring about the state of mind that you currently have. And if you want to understand what this chattering mind is, today science has discovered that this chattering mind is known as the default mode of the brain. It is the default mode of the brain. Default means when you're not engaging your brain in anything else, then the brain moves into a default state. And the default state, the default mode, the default circuit of your brain is that chatter that goes on constantly inside your head. In fact, you might be surprised to know that even before they develop language, the infants have some version of chatter going on in their heads. And from infancy till our death, we carry this chattering voice inside, and it's constantly discouraging us. It is constantly causing depression. It is causing anxiety. It is causing distress. It is constantly comparing you with what your neighbor has. It is constantly telling you to be conscious about how you can fit into society. One of the functions of the default mode of the brain is to think about, oh, why did I say that to him? Oh, why did she say that to me? Now I must, next time I meet this person, this is how I must respond. It's constantly thinking of social interactions. That's the majority of what it's thinking of. And the social interactions that it constantly thinks of makes this default mode of the brain also known as the social cognition mode. And if you want to know what it's really thinking of all the time, it's really thinking of I, me, and myself. Because without an I, me, and myself, there cannot be social cognition. There cannot be social interaction without I, me, and myself. Therefore, it's constantly thinking about self. It is constantly thinking about I, me, and myself. It's thinking about the welfare of I, me, and myself. It is thinking about the past. It is thinking about the future. And even if it is in the present moment, it is obsessed with what will this do to me? What's in it for me? Mera kya hoga? This is what the chattering mind, the monkey mind is always concerned with. The first principle is that it hardly stays in the present. It's always moving into the future, or it's always moving into the past. You can watch it and see. And indeed, you will also find that not only it's moving into the past and into the future, very difficult to keep it in the present moment. It might interest you to know that all forms of meditation, all of them, have something that keeps your mind in the present moment. So this question of the social cognition mode, the default circuit of the brain, which is constantly thinking of I, me, and myself, and what is going on around you, how is it useful? Some idiots have tried to point out it helps in creativity, but they have offered no proof for this at all. And therefore, they're doing it really to discourage meditation. Because in truth, it's when the mind is silent that true creativity comes about, not when the mind is chattering or drifting or wandering. When your mind is silent, not thinking of I, me, and myself, true creativity comes out. When you're obsessed with I, me, and myself, no creativity comes out. Or if it comes out, it's not really the kind of creativity that we are craving or that we need for our edification. So you will see, maybe I'll do a session in meditation someday, and you will see that in meditation, there are different ways by which the mind is constantly trained to be in the present moment. It might be looking into the fire while doing yajna, where you can see the flickering flames in front of you. Hypnotically, the flames will be flickering in front of you. The warmth or the heat of the fire will be felt on your face. All of these, including the acts of putting samagri, of putting ghee into the fire, all of them bring your mind to the present moment. But it's not enough to bring it to the present moment. It's also important to negate the sense of self. It is to make sure that there is no thought of I, me, and myself. If you can fulfill these two criteria, the first criteria, of course, is to keep the mind in the present moment. And the second criteria is to make sure that there are no thoughts of I, me, and myself. These two criteria will prevent you from going into social cognition mode, which will prevent you from going into the default mode, which will prevent you from going into the thoughts of I, me, and myself, which are the constant cause of distress for every human being. And in fact, not only are the cause of distress, but they are also the cause of all suffering. So while doing these studies of neuroimaging, they have seen that there are primarily two modes. And the two modes are, one is the default mode, which is always springing up whenever you are not doing something. And the other is the mode which we call as the task positive mode. And what do we mean by a task positive mode? A task positive mode is that mode of the brain, or that those circuits activated in the brain when you are engaged in doing something. Anything. When you are busily engaged in doing activity, it is known as task positive network, which becomes activated. The task positive network might be taking your clothes out of your cupboard, folding them and placing them back. It may mean driving your car with attention. It might mean going to work and performing your work. Indeed, to do your work is to remain in the present moment. And not only is it important to remain in the present moment while doing your work, if you can do that same work without thoughts of I, me, and myself, which means that you must do your work without thinking of I am the doer, and without thinking of what will I get for it or what fruit will I get for it. Which brings us to the original seminal verse on Karma Yoga in the Bhagawad Geeta, where Krishna says, Karmanyavadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachan ma karma phala heturbhur mate sangostu akarmani. You have a right to do your duty, but you have no right to the fruit. Do not consider yourself to be the doer, and do not become attached to inaction. So to think yourself to be the doer is to have sense of self. So again, you get into the circuit, which is known as a default circuit. If you are thinking of the fruit, again, you're thinking of self. Therefore, once again, you're caught up, you're trapped in thoughts of I, me, and myself, which means that once again, sure enough, you are in the default mode. And these will bring you sorrow. These will chase away any peace that you've got. If you want peace of mind, if you want clarity of mind, if you want indeed a silent mind, mana prasadat saumyatvam maunam atma vinigraha bhava samshuddhirityeta tapasa manasa uchyate. What is austerity of the mind? If you can silence your mind, that is austerity. Krishna doesn't ask you to silence the tongue, he wants you to silence the mind. And to silence the mind, you have to put the monkey mind at rest. And to keep the monkey mind at rest, you have to keep the monkey mind in the present moment. And you have to remain in the present moment simply by being in a task positive network in your brain, which is by doing your activities. And there is no activity which is better than performing your duties. Therefore, if you engage in performing your duties in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to that all-pervading Lord, then you will attain perfection. Yataha pravrittir bhutanam yena sarvam idam tatam swakarmana abhyarchaya siddhim vindati manavaha. So all people, by performing their God-given duties in a spirit of sacrifice to the all-pervading Lord, they attain perfection. So if you are engaged in work without considering yourself to be the doer, without anticipating or aspiring for fruits of doing that work. Indeed, your mind will become silent. If before you perform every activity, you do it with the consciousness and the attitude, Om Tat Sat. Krishna says all activities must be performed with the attitude of Om Tat Sat. Om Tat Sat means, Lord, this is for you, this is not for me. It is performed as yajna. Idam Krishnaya, idam namama. This is meant for you, O Lord. It is not meant for me. So this attitude of being able to offer things to God through your work is known as adoration. When we pray to God to ask for something, this is known as petition. Oh God, give me this. Oh God, give me that. Oh God, let me have this wonderful car. Oh God, let me have this wonderful place to live. So this, when you're asking something for yourself, it's called petition. The lowest form of prayer, but a means to connect with God nevertheless. Then there is intercession. Oh God, you're sleeping on the job. Let me remind you of my neighbor who is suffering. Oh God, here is this person who is suffering from illness, disease, etc. Please do something for this person. Because you're sleeping on the job and you're not all knowing, therefore I need to remind you of that. This is called intercession. You're praying on behalf of somebody else. Then there is what we call as contemplation. In contemplation, your eyes are generally closed, not always though, and your mind is silent and you're simply focused on God. Now you are not asking God to do something for you. You're waiting to hear from God what He wants you to do. So this is contemplation. It's the beginning of genuine prayer. And the real prayer is called adoration. Adoration is when you are engaged in doing your everyday work, everyday duties, everyday responsibilities, when you're doing them as an offering to the Lord. Yat karoshi yadashnasi yat juhosi dadasi yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushva madarpada. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, whatever you give away, whatever charities, whatever austerities you perform, everything Krishna says, do it for me. Shubha Shubha Falairevam Moksha se karma bandhane Sannyasa yoga yuktena vimutto mam evaishasi. If you are acting in the spirit of sacrifice, this is known by Krishna as sannyas yoga. You're living in everyday life like everybody else, but you're acting in a spirit of sacrifice to please God. And God says you will become free from good and bad karma and eventually you will come back to me. So it's important to understand that action which leads to a sense of self that is kept in abeyance by remembering God is the way by which your mind can be silenced. Simply because when you are engaged in work, your mind automatically moves to a task positive network. Otherwise, the mind moves into a task negative network. And this task negative circuit that is there in your brain, that task negative circuit is the circuit where your mind keeps wandering around I, me, and myself. And if you are engaged in activity More important, activity where you are not thinking of self. Not thinking of self in the sense you are not considering yourself to be the doer. You are allowing divinity to flow through you in the performance of activities. You are not attached to inaction, and you are not thinking of I, me, and myself, and what will I get out of it. All this will calm your mind, settle your mind. It is through work that your mind will become silenced. And it is through silence of your mind that you will get to meditation. And when you get to meditation through silencing your mind, then automatically you will be able to work in the world in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion. And you will be an asset to the world. You will be adding value to the world. And you indeed will be one of those people who generally contributes to the happiness of the world rather than to the distress of others around you. And when you work in this manner, in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to God, you will discover a unique value within yourself. You will discover your divinity. So, Karma Yoga simply means this, that work which is your duty and responsibility. You're not to engage in somebody else's duty or responsibility, your own duty and responsibility. And while you're working in your duty and your responsibility, that which has been given to you by God for this body-mind complex, while you're working to perform your duties, you keep your mind in task positive network. You let the task positive circuit become active. By being constantly engaged in a service, when you're engaged in service, when you're engaged in doing work, automatically your chattering mind will become still. In fact, the more you work, the more silent your mind will become. And the more you work in forgetfulness of self, the more you work remembering God and forgetting self, the more purified you will become and more free you will become. Yagnarthat karmano nyatra loko yam karma bandhana tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samacharaha. So, those acts which are done as an offering to God, they free you from your mind. Whereas those activities which you perform, which are not for God, which are for self, they bind you further to this world. They bind you further to your mind. And as Krishna explains in the 5th chapter of the Bhagawad Geeta, when the person is constantly acting in this spirit, soon he becomes aware that he is blinking, he is breathing, he is smelling, he is tasting, he is touching, he is doing things, he is evacuating. All this is happening, but he sees this as happening from the physical body, from the mind and body. And he knows that he stands apart from this. And through this, he becomes aware that he is truly absorbed in Karma Yoga. So when your mind is occupied in doing activities, automatically what happens is that you find that your mind becomes silent. When these activities are done, forgetting self and remembering God. Well, but we can't be active all the time. So when we are not active all the time, what do we do? Be very careful. Because when your mind is not occupied in performing activities or duties, it's not in task positive network, it will destroy you. It will destroy you. People don't realize that even your everyday chores that you perform, everyday activities that you perform, these are also calming to the mind. Watering your flowers, ironing your clothes, folding your garments, all these activities calm your mind. When you have a dozen people to do those things for you, your mind is no longer in task positive mode. Your mind moves into default mode. Why? Because you have too many servants, too many people wanting to do things for you. And when there are more and more people wanting to do things for you, and there's very little for you to do, your brain never goes into task positive network. It goes constantly into default mode. And such people are always miserable. So there was once upon a time a man who was given an Aladdin's lamp. And he rubbed this Aladdin's lamp without realizing it said, if you rub this lamp, a huge monkey genie will come out. And sure enough, that monkey genie came out. And what a monkey he was. He was like a gorilla. So he asked that monkey genie, what can you do? So he said, you tell me what you want and I'll give it to you. So he asked for as much money as he could ever consume in one lifetime, or in several lifetimes for his offspring also. So he gave him a huge amount of wealth. He says, now I want a fantastic castle in which I can keep all of this and also live with gardens and pools of water by the seaside and have a great time. Gave him all that. He says, now I'd like to have the most beautiful women in the world waiting on me hand and foot. So sure, the monkey genie said, and he produced all that for him. Then he said, now let me enjoy. He says, I can't be inactive. So read the small print on the lamp, and the small print on the lamp says that if you cannot keep me occupied, I will eat you up. So the genie, the monkey genie said, if you can't keep me occupied in doing something, I'm going to eat you up. So then this guy said, all right, get me a ladder. So he gave him a fantastic ladder. He says, put it up against the wall of the castle. He put it up. He says, now I want you to climb up that ladder until you reach the top. And when you reach the top, you climb down again. And when you reach the bottom, climb up again. Keep climbing up and down that ladder until I can think of something for you to do. So my friends, your jap mala, your beads are that ladder. The genie is your mind. And your chanting on those beads is making that genie walk up and down that ladder. If instead of wasting your times on frivolous distractions, you can spend 2 hours of the day in the morning and 2 hours of the day in the evening. This accounts to roughly, shall we say, 16 malas of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in the morning and 16 malas of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in the evening. If you can do this twice a day, when you are not otherwise engaged in doing something useful, your mind will move into task positive network. And by chanting the Lord's name, the name of the Lord will dance on your tongue. Kaler Nama Rupa Avatar. In Kali Yuga, the avatar of the Lord is in His holy name. So by chanting His holy name for this period of time that I recommend, I will assure you and guarantee you that if you can perform your everyday activities in a spirit of sacrifice to God and spend this many hours of the day chanting God's name, in 15 days you will see the difference. In 15 days you will get the difference. If you don't, please contact me. So with this, I will pause and I will happily answer any questions you have.
Good morning, sir. So I will start with our first question. So can we say that the more we get away from our true selves, the more we get stuck in the world instead of getting through it?
What is the question? I don't understand.
So I'm trying to say is, can we say that the more we get away from our true selves, uh, so with that, the more we get stuck in the world instead of getting through it?
What do you mean by more you get away from? What do you mean by true self?
Our true nature, so the more we get away from our true nature, our true
What is your
self.
true nature?
So can we say that?
What is your true nature?
The true nature of being a human, true nature of a human being, as we get away from it, from
See, most
uh,
people think of the true nature as being my nature. So I don't like ice cream. That's my true nature. Don't force me to eat ice cream. And if you force me to eat ice cream, then I won't be happy. So this is all rubbish. Forget about this true nature nonsense. Your true nature is that you are the soul.
yes.
You are not the body.
Mhm.
And if you perform the activities that have been given to your prakriti,
Mhm.
which is your body, mind, and intelligence and sense of self,
Mhm.
in a spirit of sacrifice and devotion to please God, you will find peace.
Definitely so. So everyone wants to be happy, of course, and everyone has its own definition of happiness. So is there any?
You can't find happiness until you have peace.
Hmm. Yes, exactly.
The Bhagavad Gita, it says, Ashantasya kuto sukham.
Hmm.
Those who do not have peace cannot find happiness. So my suggestion is stop looking for happiness in the world. It's the cause you will only find hysteria.
Hmm.
Instead, try to find happiness, try to find peace, and you will find true happiness. False
Absolutely, sir.
happiness is the happiness that you get from the senses and from the world.
Hmm.
True happiness is what we call as eudaimonic happiness, which is a sense of joy that arises from the existence of our being.
Hmm. Absolutely. So, a few minutes ago, as you were talking about that, when we are dependent on more people for our own things, then the happiness and this peace part gets away from us. So, can we also say that the people living in remote areas are happier and healthier than the ones living urban life?
Well, let me tell you, it doesn't matter whether you live in rural areas or you live in urban areas. If you keep
Hmm.
yourself busy in a spirit of sacrifice, you
Hmm.
will be at peace. If
Hmm.
you're at peace, there will be an opportunity for joy, which comes
Hmm.
from within.
Hmm. Exactly. So, sir, these were our questions for today, and thank you so much for such a wonderful session. And so, we will see you next week. Thank you so much.
Hari Om, Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, sir. Thank you so much.